I can't believe we are a third of the way through this 2025 quilt along. Hey friends, welcome back to my sewing room. My name is Becca, and in today's video, I am going to show you the fabric that came in this Cotton Cuts Classic subscription box. Then I'm going to use some of that fabric to show you how to make this month's block, the Dutchman's puzzle. If you're new around here and you don't know what we're doing, we are doing a very beginner-friendly quilt along throughout all of 2025. Every month, I will drop a tutorial right here on my YouTube channel and a free pattern on my website that's going to give you all of the cutting instructions and step-by-step details to make this block in 4 different sizes. A 3-inch finished, 6-inch finished, 9-inch finished, and 12-inch finished. It's a completely free quilt along, and it's not too late to start sewing if you haven't joined us already. And because the patterns of the videos aren't going anywhere, if you fall behind, no worries. You've got all year to catch up. We're going to get started by pulling the fabric out of this box to see what Cotton Cut selected for me. The card inside of my box says that Miss Mary has picked my fabric for me, and she chose a combination of batiks, florals, reproduction, and blenders. I'm not really a big fan of reproduction fabrics, and I really don't like brown, and there feels like there's a lot of brown going on in this month's box. So it's going to be interesting to see what my love meter is for each of these fat quarters. The first fat quarter that we have is classified as a blender, and it is from Flower Patches by Amaryllis Henderson for Moda Fabrics. We have 2 fat quarters from Things Above by Fancy That Design House for Moda Fabrics. I really kind of like this one, but this one is beautiful and probably, if I had to rate it, my favorite out of the whole box. These next 2, I don't have the selvage that tells me what this is, so I'll have to look it up. Don't worry, it's on the screen right now so you guys can see. So there's the first of the 2, and here is the second of the 2. Again, I don't have the selvage that tells me anything about those fat quarters. But these next 4, I do think, in fact, I know, are part of the Laundry Basket Quilts line Cocoa Pink. So this one's really kind of cool. It's got a really big print. I think this was probably meant to be more of like a border fabric. I wonder if this might work for our block. Gotta tell you, I'm loving this pink one. This is great. I love the shade. I love the little print. I love the flowers. I love everything about this one. I don't mind the print on this one, but the red has more of that brown undertone, which I'm not really a fan of, but it would work nicely with that fabric, right? Here is my last fat quarter from the Laundry Basket Quilts line, and I, again, don't necessarily love the shade of this, but when it's with these fabrics, it definitely goes together. So, you know, sometimes when you get a line, a couple of the fabrics don't look great, but when it's combined with other prints from that same line, it does the trick. I have no idea what line this fabric is from, but it looks like the word cotton is over here. And I'm wondering if this is going with this down here, which, by the way, they have that classified as a blender. I don't know. I feel like this maybe could be a blender. I don't know. I do like this one. I don't love that one. The last 2 fabrics that I have are batiks. These are from the Berrylicious Batiks by Moda Fabrics. This has got kind of a tie-dye effect to it, and gosh, I really love the way it looks in the screen. In person, it doesn't look the same. It looks so much better on camera. And then I like this one as well. It's just kind of like an all-over leaf design with kind of like a berry color. One of the things that I love about recording this video is as I'm going through each of these fat quarters, I can look on the screen as I'm flipping through to see how the fabric is reading on camera. Sometimes fabric, just like a quilt, will read a bit better for me when I see a picture of it or I see it on camera, and that is definitely the case with this tie-dye one here. Sometimes when we're sitting right in front of the fabric and it's just a few inches from our nose, our eyes focus in on just one area of the fabric. But if we can take a picture of it or just take a few steps back, we can see that all over design that's on the fabric. And sometimes we might like it a little bit more or a little bit less. Now I need to figure out which of these fabrics I want to use for this month's block. Let's take a look. So here's my pattern, and you can see I've got 3 fabrics that I need for this block. I need a background, and then I need 2 different prints for the flying geese bodies. And I want to have a bit of contrast between each one because that's going to give me this secondary effect of the pinwheel that's right in the middle. So I don't want to use the same fabric for the bodies of all the flying geese, though you certainly could if you wanted to. The other thing that I'm thinking about is we're going to be using the 4 at a time method, which doesn't give me complete control over the direction of all these fabrics. So I don't think I want to bother with any of my directional prints. So the trick here is to find 3 fabrics from this range that work well together, but have a bit of contrast so I can get that pinwheel design out from the overall look, that secondary design, but also try to exclude any border prints. If I allowed myself to bring in some fabric into each block, which I'm not, I want to make every block entirely out of only the fabric that I got from Cotton Cuts. I'll tell you what I probably would have done. I probably would have used just these 2 fabrics with a very soft background so that I get that ultimate contrast, but I am not going to do that because I want to challenge myself to use only the fabric that Cotton Cut sent to me. So this is going to be my palette. Wish me luck. Now that our fabric is all cut out, we're going to use that 4 at a time method to make 2 sets of 4 flying geese units. This is known commonly as the no waste method, but I like to call it the low waste method because the way I do it actually does require the flying geese units to be squared up a little bit. I would always rather cut a little bit bigger and then size down to get really precise points. So the first thing that we're going to do is mark the back side of our squares. On the wrong side of each of these squares, we're going to draw a diagonal line from one corner down to the other. I have an air-soluble pen from Sewline. I love marking my fabrics with this pen because the mark just goes away on its own. It stands up to any starching or steam pressing that I'm going to do because it is not water soluble, and because it is not heat erasable, I can press and still have that marking there. It just goes away on its own after a bit of time. It can be a few hours to a couple of days depending on how much air is moving over top of the fabric. Once those are done, we're going to take 4 of those squares that we just marked, and we're going to pair them with one of the big squares, and the other 4 will be paired with the other big square. This all comes together with how you're going to lay these squares out on this bigger square. We're going to lay down the bigger square that we want to associate with these smaller squares, and we're going to take one small square and we're going to lay it in the upper left corner, making sure that that line starts in the corner and goes diagonally to the bottom right. And then we're going to take another square and line it up so that it is in the bottom right corner. Uh-oh, that don't look great. Oh yeah, this ain't going to do it. Well, I made a boo-boo. I made a copy-paste error when I put the pattern together. And so the cutting instructions for the 3-inch, the 6-inch, and the 9-inch block were perfect, but the 12-inch block was about 3/4 of an inch too small for fabric A. And I tried to fix it on the fly without actually going back and doing the math, and it still didn't work. Let me show you what happened so that you understand what you should be getting. These were the flying geese units that I was working on. And do you notice what's wrong? Yeah, there's no room up here for a seam allowance. We're coming to a perfect point right at the edge of the block. So when I go to sew this into a quilt and I join it at 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to have a plateau instead of a point. And while that would be a wonderful design for some other project, that's not the look that I'm going for in this one. I have a bit of fabric right here that I can show you what happened. So I drew my line from one corner to the other, and when I laid my smaller squares on the bigger square, these pieces of fabric right here, this should be overlapping, which is going to help us get our seam allowance on the flying geese unit. These were not overlapping, so I already knew when I was sewing this together that I was most likely going to have an issue, but I kept going anyway. Now, I'm going to tell you, I did this block twice, and I don't have enough of this background fabric to cut and use in my block. But I do have enough to still use this as the body and this as the body. So now I've just got to figure out what fabric is going to go with both of those and be okay in the background. So let's go back to the drawing board. So here are the two pieces that I want to use for my flying geese bodies, and this is the rest of the Cotton Cuts fabric that I've gotten in my box, and I'm not really sure what fabric I want to use with those. Definitely want to have a bit of contrast. These are out. This one could maybe work, so we'll keep that in there as a maybe. This is from that line, and I think this would work. It would give me a lot of contrast here and a lot of contrast there, but what's throwing me off is the way this fabric is printed. I could end up with some white area or some of this, but maybe it'll be okay. This is a strong contender for sure, so I'm going to leave this up here. I also have, I don't love that one now that I'm looking at it again. I have this. I have this, and then each of these. I don't think I love those with it. It would have to be one of these. And so I'm looking in the camera right away. This doesn't give me as much contrast as these two, so I'm going to pull that out. And so now I'm looking at one or two, and my eye's automatically going here, even though that's more of a border print. So we'll see if we can make that work. What's working in my favor with this is the squares that I'm going to cut are only going to need to be 4 inches. So because this is a border print and I'm just cutting 4-inch squares, I might be able to prioritize getting a cut out of the flower so that I have a more uniform brown and pink for the background without lots of white spots in between. Let's see if we can make that work. Ooh, I'm going to be able to get a 4-inch strip almost perfectly. This is going to be great. Once all of these squares have our line drawn, we're going to make 2 piles of 4. One pile is going to go with one of our bigger squares, and the other pile is going to go with the other big square. And the magic here comes in with how we're going to lay these small squares on top of the bigger one. So we're going to start by taking one of the smaller squares and we're going to line it up in the upper left corner, making sure that those edges are nice and flush together. And that line should be starting in the upper left corner, running down to the lower right. Then we're going to take our second square and we're going to line it up in the lower right corner with that line continuing all the way down, starting upper left, going to the lower right. And you'll take a peek right here in the middle. You should have these two fabrics overlapping about, I don't know, is that a quarter or a half inch? Something like that. They should be overlapping. As we saw before, if they're not overlapping, you're not going to get room for your seam allowance and you're going to lose your point. So make sure that the fabric's on top of each other. Now let's take the sewing machine and sew a 1/4 of an inch on either side of that line. Once we have our seam sewn, then we're just going to cut right on that line all the way through this big square. And now I should have these 2 units. I'm going to press the fabric up towards those little squares, our fabric A. And when I do that, I should get a unit that looks kind of like a heart. Once I have my 2 heart units, then we're going to do another addition. We're going to take in the last 2 squares and we're going to lay it so that it is in the bottom corner of the bigger square fabric. And the line is coming from that bottom corner all the way up, right in between the 2 peaks of the heart. We're going to do that for both of those units. And then just like we did before, we're going to take these to our sewing machine and stitch 1/4 inch on either side of that line. When that's sewn together, you have something that looks like this, and it might not look like it's gonna be what you expect it to be. But when I bring my ruler in and my rotary cutter and I cut right on that line, I have a flying geese unit with enough room for a seam allowance. So I'm going to cut both of those so that I have 4 pieces. Then I'm going to take these to my pressing station and I'm going to press the fabric up underneath my fabric A. Now this method is often referred to as the no waste method, but I like to call it the low waste method because I find I still need to square my flying geese units up just a little bit. Not terribly a lot needs to come off, but they still require that squaring. To square these up, I'm going to grab a ruler that has a 45-degree line, and I'm just going to lay it on top of a flying geese unit and make sure that that 45-degree line is right on top of the seam between the body and the wing of my flying geese. Then I'm going to also look at this edge here and this edge here to make sure that the fabric is either reaching or extending past my desired square up size. And because I'm going to square these to 3.5 inches by 6.5 inches, I'm looking for 3.5 down here and 6.5 over here while keeping that 45-degree line right on top of my seam. And if I want to be even more complicated, I'm also looking to make sure that this point is about 1/4 inch in so that I don't lose it when I sew it into the block. Once I've made that cut, I'm going to turn it around, and now I'm going to line up the cut edge, both of those cut edges, with the measurement that I'm squaring up to. And then I should have a flying geese unit that is exactly what I need for my block. Let's square the rest up. Once we've done all of those steps with the one flying geese unit, we're going to repeat all of them with the second one so that we have 4 flying geese units of each type. And the next part is just to make 4 blocks that are exactly the same and then put those 4 blocks into the larger block in a 4-patch orientation. What you're going to need to remember is whatever fabric is going to be your pinwheel in the center, that's going to have to go on the bottom of your block. And all 4 units are going to look just like this. So for me, I am going to have this as my pinwheel and this as the outer spin. So I just need to sew them like that. When all 4 of my units are sewn together and pressed, then I'm just going to lay it out following the diagram that I have here. The first block in the upper left is going to point up. Then I'm going to rotate 90 degrees clockwise, and I'm going to continue to rotate each one of these blocks 90 degrees clockwise until I have 4 units that are all going together in a circular motion. Now I'm just going to sew this together as a 4-patch. My top row, the seam is going to go to the right. The bottom row, the seam is going to go to the left, and that's going to allow those seams to nest really nicely. But you are welcome to press this open if you want that middle to be super, super flat, because there is going to be a bit of bulk coming into the middle. Can't get away with that bulk with a pinwheel. And here is our Dutchman's puzzle. Mine is not perfect. You can definitely see where I lost my points on almost all of the blocks in the center. But you know what? By the time this is pieced together and quilted, I don't think anybody's going to really notice that, especially because all the prints are so busy. There's just a lot going on. And I've already cut this block like 3 times and made 2 mistakes, so I'm leaving it the way it is because at the end of the day, it is all sewn together. And remember, finished is better than perfect. Thank you, friends, so much for doing the 2025 quilt along with me. I'm having a blast, and I hope you are seriously enjoying those free patterns that I'm putting out for you every single month. Don't forget to take a photo of your block, post it on social media, either in my Facebook group or somewhere with this hashtag, and your block could be featured in next month's video. So let's see which blocks caught my eye last month.